The way we lead impacts the way people live. This world needs truly human leadership. I'm Brent Stewart, your host. Thanks for listening. This podcast is an outreach of Barry-Wehmiller. You can connect with us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter at Barry-Wehmiller, and find our podcast articles and videos at trulyhumanleadership.com. You're listening to a Truly Human Leadership podcast refresher, where we reshare insight from podcast episodes from the past. You've heard Kristen Hadeed before on the podcast, the founder and CEO of Student Maid, one of Florida's largest independently owned cleaning services. Kristen has been a friend of Barry-Wehmiller and our CEO Bob Chapman for a while now, and she's a graduate of our Listen Like a Leader course, initially taught through Barry-Wehmiller University. Our first conversation with Kristen here on the podcast centered around the millennial workforce, of which Kristen is a part, but she also has quite a bit of experience in leading through her business. It was a great conversation with lots of insight, and you should check it out if you haven't already. Kristen recently released a book, Permission to Screw Up: How I Learned to Lead by Doing Almost Everything Wrong. Now, clearly, Kristen didn't almost do everything wrong because she built a successful business and has become a great leader. But the book chronicles her journey in building a business and learning what it is to be a leader. On this episode, Mary Rudder, Barry-Wehmiller's Director of Global Messaging, and I talked to Kristen about that journey and what she hopes others can learn from her screw-ups.
I hope a few things. I hope, most importantly, that people feel less alone in their struggling and screwing up and making mistakes. I think it's critical. It's how we become successful. It's how we learn. And I want people to know that it's normal and that you never truly figure it out, that you master something and then there's another challenge waiting for you. I hope that some people avoid the big mistakes that I've made. So I hope that, my story will help, especially those who are new leaders and are really new to this, maybe avoiding some of the mistakes that I've made. But I think also being okay with talking about it. And when you are struggling and when you've messed up, saying that out loud to not only, make it an environment where people are comfortable talking about those things. Also, I think it makes leadership more attainable for other people, because the next generation, here we are, we're seeing these wonderful people, so much potential. They're coming into the workplace and they want so badly to make a difference. But if they want to be a leader and they're comparing themselves to somebody who seemingly is perfect on the outside and doesn't mess up and has all the answers, they think, oh man, I'm not cut out for this. So when we talk about, hey, I don't have the answers, I need your help on this, we make leadership more attainable. And behind every great leader and every great company, there is that imperfect story. And so I wrote mine hoping that it will inspire others to talk about theirs.
When you write a book called Permission to Screw Up, you're kind of giving the reader the impression that you're going to talk about mistakes and you're going to be honest about them. In the book, though, you talk about how that actually wasn't really your first kind of intention. Mm-hmm. So how hard was it for you to be that transparent?
When I first got the contract to write the book, I was pretty lost. I thought, what am I supposed to write about? And I started writing about the things that I talked about in my speeches, which was how successful Student Maid was and how we had a great culture and how we beat our industry average retention rate by a landslide. And I'm writing, and it was really easy to write. And I read back what I had written, and it just felt empty. Like there wasn't any substance. It just was about success. And I went to dinner with a friend who's written several books, and I kind of joked about how easy it was to write the book. I think I was on the fourth chapter. And he said, well, in my experience, you're writing the right book if it's really hard to write. And that comment really stood out to me. And I thought, man, maybe I'm not writing the right book. So what I realized is a lot of the books I read when I started my company, you learn a little bit about the leader at the beginning of their journey. And then it kind of fast forwards to the end of here's where I am now. And you're kind of left wondering sometimes what happened in that middle part, what really happened. And it's not that you can't, I took wonderful things away from those books, but I really wish that I would have found a book when I started my company that helped me realize you're never going to truly figure it out. You're going to screw up, you're going to become a better leader, and then you're going to make another mistake. And that's how you learn. And so I decided to write the book that I wish I would have found on the shelf when I started. And it was really hard to write because it caused me to think about the things I didn't do well. How did I make people feel in those situations? What was the outcome of that? Some of it's embarrassing. Some of it I wish I could take back. And then you send those words to a publisher and then they're out there forever. And it's what will people think of me? Will their view of me change as a leader? But I realize everyone has that. Everyone struggles and everyone has an imperfect story behind their company and their leadership journey. And that's what makes it perfect. That's how we learn and how we grow. So I wanted to write that story. And it was hard.
Yeah. There are a number of themes throughout the book, and they're almost kind of tent poles on your leadership journey, issues that you're or leadership qualities, you might call them, that you develop a better understanding of as you go on. And transparency is one of them. How important is it for leaders to be transparent? How important is that in an organization?
I think transparency is critical when we talk about building trust. I think when people know exactly what's going on, they trust that you're always going to be honest with them. But I think the challenge is, as the leader, you want to make people feel safe and you want to paint this vision for them of success and that they can, they're safe with this company. And so I think where we get it wrong sometimes is when something isn't going well and we are stumbling or we're not sure what to do, we keep that to ourselves because we don't want to cause fear in the people around us. What I found is that when you actually can say that out loud and say, I don't have the answer, I don't know where we're going to go from here, not only do your people want to help you and it becomes now a team effort, but they know that you're honest and it inspires them to be more honest and to ask for help when they're struggling. And so I think when you can get to that point where you openly admit that you don't have the answers and encourage others to do the same, you can solve any challenge together and you have a better and a stronger team.
And that trust works two ways. And that's another kind of theme in the book, kind of another tent pole in the book of leadership qualities that you gradually grow to understand more and more. And that's the empowerment side of it. Mm-hmm. And there's one story in the book, it's early on, where you have an intern that makes a very costly payroll mistake.
Yes.
And that kind of started this trust and empowerment journey of you learning more and more about that. Can you talk about that experience a little bit and then how that road developed for you?
Sure. I used to lead people by telling them what to do. Not because I wanted to be bossy, but I just thought this is the easiest way to spell out exactly what my expectations are, to tell them exactly how to do it, so that no one's making mistakes, so that they, have all the information they need to do their job. And not only is that exhausting, it's not sustainable because you really need people to be empowered, to think on their own, to trust their own decision making. But when you do that, it means that sometimes they're going to mess up. And so you have to create this environment where they feel safe and they know that even if they make a choice that has a poor outcome, that you're going to stand by them. And our rule in Student Maid is as long as you make a decision that's in line with our values, even if the outcome isn't the best, you never have to worry about losing your job. But if you make a decision out of greed, selfishness, dishonesty, then that's a different scenario. So when I had started this philosophy of, okay, I'm going to trust people. I'm going to really back away and empower them to solve their own problems. When they ask me to solve something, I'm going to put it back on them and ask them, what do you think the best answer is? And you should go do that. And so I had an intern and she wanted HR experience. She asked if she could, work on all things HR. And I thought, well, what better than to do payroll? Because this is to be able to say that you did payroll for a company as an intern is really huge and would really help her in her future. My payroll representative from the payroll company said, I don't think that's a good idea. This person doesn't know anything about HR, but I trusted Lizzie and I wanted to empower her and I wanted her to be able to do this. So I taught her how to do payroll. I handed over the reins. And she mistakenly overpaid 27 people by $40,000. I didn't have room in my bank account for that kind of a mistake. So it was really scary. And my initial reaction was to solve it. to call the payroll company, reverse it, figure it out. But I decided to put it on Lizzie to do that. And I said, what do you think we should do? And she, her suggestions were great. Let's call all the employees, tell them not to spend the money. Let's call the payroll company. And I just kind of followed her lead. I was there to support her, but I let her really drive that bus, and we got the money back. She was so proud. She was so proud, even through that failure, that she was the one that fixed it. And then it came to be payroll time again. And I said, well, it's your turn to do payroll again. And she said, wait, you can't be serious. You're going to let me do it again? And I said, yeah, I trust you. And she went off to have a very successful career in an HR company in the UK, and told that story in all of her interviews, because she really learned, even though she made a terrible mistake, she learned so much in that moment.
Mm-hmm. How important, early on when you were in the book, when you were talking about when your business was pretty new, you spent a lot of time, got back into the trenches with your workers. Why was that important?
When I started, I didn't have any leadership experience. I was 19 when I started my company, and all of a sudden I have 60 people working alongside me, and they were my age, because I decided to only hire students. So they were my peers, and I had this contract where we had so many apartments to clean in a short amount of time. And that is why I hired 60 people to help. And in every movie I'd ever seen about business where there's a boss, the boss sits in the office, and there was an air-conditioned clubhouse at this apartment complex. And so that's where I sat, and I told my team, this is where I am, and if you need me, I'll be here. And I wasn't doing it to be, I'm better than you, and I'm going to sit in the air conditioning, but I just thought that's what I'm supposed to do. And so my people were cleaning these filthy apartments, sweating, it's so hot. And after a couple days, they decided I don't want to do this anymore. And 45 of them walked out, 45 of the 60. And I was able to get them back. I called an emergency meeting at my house. I apologized to them. I was just human. I said, I don't know what I did. I messed up. This is my first time really being a leader. And I think they saw that I was really a human being and they wanted to help me. But that moment taught me that leadership isn't sitting in the office. It isn't sitting in the clubhouse. And after that, I would greet them in the morning at their cars. I would help them carry their supplies to their apartment. I learned their names. I learned what they were studying. I learned about their families. I got in the trenches with them. And I think that's what makes somebody want to follow a leader. It's, are you willing to do what you're asking me to do? And if you are, then I want to work with you. But if you're not, and you're cold and you're distant and you're sitting in the office, there's a disconnect there, and it's not. Cleaning is not fun work. So there has to be something that's keeping people there. And that summer really taught me to not only care about people. I mean, I cared about people, but how to care about people, how as a leader. But also that I had a huge challenge ahead of me, that I had to really figure out how to create a culture where people wanted to be, because the work was absolutely not going to keep them there.
In that piece with trust and empowerment and cultures you just brought up, it seems like one of the struggles that you guys at Student Maid had for a long time was a struggle between having written rules and trying to have a culture where people felt trusted and felt empowered. How difficult was that struggle? Trying to determine how many quote unquote rules you should have to do things in a proper way, but then also to create a culture where people didn't feel oppressed by rules and also empowered to do the things that they need to do.
I think this was the hardest piece to figure out. And honestly, we still struggle with it. It's how do you make people feel cared for and supported while also holding them accountable? And especially in a company that embraces failing and screwing up. And I have always been the type of person where I would rather handle things on a one-off, look at the situation for who is this person? How long have they been with their company? What are the circumstances? And decide how to handle it individually. But then there are also people who think that black and white rules are critical and that there needs to be structure. And I think both. I think you have to find a way to have structure, but to also use your heart and really look at the circumstances surrounding the situation. So we've been through both extremes, having absolutely no rules, which isn't good, because then people may not feel like they're being treated fairly, or this person got treated this way and this person got treated this way. And then if you go the opposite, that didn't work either. Having black and white rules and sticking to those made people feel afraid and feared breaking the rules versus it was like they were focusing on that more than their job. So we had to come to this middle place, and we call it the line. And what we say is, we're going to stand at the line as leaders. We're going to stand here. We're going to give you all the tools to do your job. We are going to support you. We are going to, even when you fail, as long as you make a decision that's in line with our values, we're still going to support you even if you fail. But you have to be standing at the line too. You have to want to be here. You have to be trying. You have to be taking the feedback that we give you and growing from it. And this relationship only works if we're both standing at the line. And if you're not standing at the line, we have to talk about what that means. And usually it means that you can't be here anymore. And so that metaphor really has helped us. We have a line in our office, and our handbook, which has all of our rules, we call it the guidebook, because we say that the rules in this that are here for a guide. This is how we should, potentially handle this situation, but we're going to take into account, are you standing at the line? And if you are, you don't have to worry about losing your job. But if you're not, we can't make you want to be here. We can't make you try. We can't make you care. That has to be there. So it's really helped us, but it was a long journey to get there.
You talk about yourself as a cheerleader and how that's the kind of recognition that you're good at. You're good at being that very vocal person that's right there cheering somebody on. That developed over time, and your ideas about recognition developed over time. And I think it started with watching one of your people clean a toilet who wasn't quite motivated.
Yes.
Not that there's any motivating anybody to do something like that.
Yes.
But you tried to figure out a way how to make him feel better about himself and the job that he was doing. So kind of talk about that story a little bit, and then talk about how those views of recognition evolved.
Well, Bill is who you're talking about. And Bill, I walked into this apartment, and he was cleaning the toilet slower than I've ever seen anyone do anything in my life. I mean, I had to make sure he was breathing. I mean, I said, Bill, are you all right? And I remember he looked at me, and it felt so bad. He was sweating, and he just said, I'm all right. I'm just sick of cleaning toilets. And I thought, what am I supposed to do? Of course he's sick of cleaning toilets. Everyone's sick of cleaning toilets. I wish I would have picked a different industry is what I'm thinking in my head. But I couldn't. So I thought, do I give him a break, a snack? Do I say, please, I need you to step it up? I didn't know. And I just decided to give him a pep talk. And I told him he was such a great team member that I didn't know where we would be without him. And in front of my eyes, I saw him kind of transform. I mean, it was like he came back to life, and he cleaned several apartments after that at a very fast pace. And so that was the first moment I realized your words really have power. And I took it a little bit overboard. That is how I treated everyone. I would say, you're great, you're amazing. I would tell them every day, but even when they weren't. So if I would walk into a place and see that maybe they missed mopping the kitchen, I would say, great job on the kitchen. And then they would turn or leave and I would mop the kitchen myself. And I realized, as a leader, number one, you have recognition is critical, and people have to feel valued and significant, and that's your job. But it's also your job to tell them when they could be better, because that's how you help people grow. And it's also how you build trust, because when you have someone in your life who is going to say, hey, I need you to be better here, you trust them, because they're always willing to tell you what you need to hear, and that they're not hiding anything from you. They're always voicing how they feel. So I really had that was a real struggle. How do I be both? And what I learned is that recognition, when you say great job, amazing, that's not really meaningful. You don't really remember years down the road that someone told you great job. And it was actually Barry-Wehmiller. I went to your Listen Like a Leader course, a 3-day course that changed my whole view, especially on recognition and feedback with the FBI, and how when you communicate how you felt about someone's behavior and the impact that had, feeling behavior impact, it is really meaningful. So instead of saying great job, saying, I felt proud when you spoke up in the meeting this morning, and the impact was that now after you spoke, everyone shared their opinion. Thank you. What you're doing is, by being so specific and telling that person how you really felt in that moment, is you're inspiring them to want to do it again. And then on the flip side, when they let you down and they need to be better, saying, I felt disappointed when you were 30 minutes late this morning, and now the impact is I'm unsure if I can rely on you. And now that person is inspired to change their behavior, because they don't want to make you feel disappointed or have the impact that you now can't rely on them. So the FBI really changed the way that we do recognition and feedback at Student Maid. And we taught all of our students how to give FBIs, because I think it's so important in a culture that it's not just the top down. It's, you can recognize and confront difficult situations, but so can your people, and they can say it to you. And you have to give people the tools to do that. So the FBI is a critical part of our environment, and we teach everyone in their first few days at Student Maid the importance of it, how to give one. And we also say that in this company, we are going to tell you what you need to hear, even if it's hard, because we want you to grow and be better. If we didn't care about you, we just would keep it to ourselves. And so reminding people when you do give feedback that it's all coming from a place of love and that you care about them, I found that made it a lot easier for me to be that balance of a cheerleader, but also a leader.
How do these leadership lessons sit with groups where they're, mid-level or senior leaders, Kristen? I mean, what's their reaction?
I think that what I've written in this book, it's not anything that's revolutionary. There are things that we all know. We have to recognize people. We have to confront people sometimes. We have to be honest and be vulnerable. It's things that we hear, we know. But we maybe forget what that looks like in a company, or the impact that it can have. Or I think the challenge is, how do you as a leader take something that you know and teach other people how to do it? So I think the reaction when I speak, and from what I've heard so far in the book, is people who've been in a leadership position for a long time or are in that middle position. It's now a question of, okay, if I already know these things, how do I help the people around me to become leaders? And I think Student Maid has become more of an education company, where we believe it's our job and our responsibility, while we're caring for these people, to teach them the skills that they need to be successful. And I think that's what it's doing for other people too. So instead of thinking only about yourself and getting better in these areas, it's how do you help the people around you to do the same.
Riding along with what Mary said there, in one section of the book you talk about how talking to people about emotion in business and the place of emotion in business. And he said that some people, just kind of scoff at you. Where do you think the place is for emotion in business?
It starts with understanding what emotion and vulnerability looks like in a company. And it doesn't mean that people are sitting around crying all the time, that every meeting is a therapy session. And those are that's the feedback I get when I talk about bringing emotion and vulnerability to work. I get, so we're supposed to cry, and well, sometimes maybe you cry, but to me, what happens is you have stuff going on in your personal life, and it's weighing on you, and you're thinking about it, and then you walk into work, and in places where feelings and emotions are not not a part of the culture, you're supposed to check it at the door and then work, and then you're supposed to pick up that thing when you leave. No, that's not how human beings operate. It's on your mind. It's weighing on you. It's affecting your work. So I think that when you create the space for people to talk about what's going on in their life, to be vulnerable and open up, to maybe cry if they need to cry, you are a better team, because you understand what everyone's got going on, and you can rearrange work if you need to so it gets done. You can be there to support your team members if they need support. And it starts with the leader. That kind of culture doesn't happen unless the leader is willing to say, I'm having a bad day. This is what's going on in my life today. So just so if I'm not myself today, this is why. And then now maybe you inspire somebody to do that another day. We always start our meetings with what we call personal check-in. So it's just a quick check-in. Everyone goes around and they say what's going on in their personal life. And sometimes things are great, but sometimes someone's dealing with something serious. And it's good for the team to know that, so we can not only rearrange the work, but be there to support them.
So when you talk about, we often talk about treating our people like family, but you actually have family in your office. So tell us a little bit about how that came about and how difficult or easy that was for you.
Yes. Well, I never thought my mom would be working with us, and I don't even remember how she really joined the team. One day she was there. I mean, she was always involved and excited about the company, both my mom and my dad. But my mom, her whole life was my sister and I. And when we graduated, she, it was her chance to go do something. And I said, Mom, now's your chance. What do you want to do? And my dad was saying the same thing. And she said, I would really love to work at Student Maid. And so she started coming into the office a little bit, but then one day she was a part of our leadership team. And what I learned is, even though she's my mom and I'm very close with her, I didn't know her as well as I thought I did. And we talked about vulnerability and really opening up about our lives. There was one moment where it was a leadership team meeting, and we each shared a story about our childhood that kind of defined who we are. And I got the idea because I'd went to a conference where Bob Jordan, a Southwest executive, spoke, and he shared about how he did this with his board. So I did the same thing with the team, and my mom shared a story about her childhood that I didn't know. And it was related to her having to give her paychecks to her parents because they didn't have any money, and something that happened that really was unfair, and why she became an advocate for people being treated fairly, especially when it comes to money. And my whole life, she's been, whenever there is financial injustice, she takes it to the extreme. She gets so upset, and I've never been able to understand that part of her, and it created conflict in our relationship. She would always, tell me where to gas up my car and go here, you'll save 2 cents. And even though I would burn the 2 cents by driving all the way to the gas station, and we would argue in high school. I just remember arguing about these things. And then I hear this story about our life, and I realize, oh my goodness, this is why. And it totally changed my perspective. And now we don't argue about those things at all because I understand. So I think it's really special. I'm so glad that my mom works with me, and I got to learn this side of her and learn more about who she is. But it also shows that sometimes the people in your life who you think you know, you don't until you ask the right questions.
How important is it to ask the right questions of your people?
I think it's really important. I think that's the leader's job. I think you have to be willing to ask the questions that are hard, but also listen, which I also learned from your Listen Like a Leader course. I think sometimes when we start our leadership meetings, I always try to ask, and we have a meeting once a month. What I'm referring to, it's kind of like a workshop our leadership team takes together. It's a full day where we come together. We talk a lot about the business, of course, but I always open it up with something that causes us to get vulnerable and know more about each other. And sometimes I push the limit. I'm like, oh, this question's a tough one. But I find that the tougher the question, the more you learn about people, and being willing to answer it first to make people feel safe. And if you're willing to answer it, then others are inspired to answer. And if someone doesn't want to answer, it's okay. Saying, it's all right. You don't have to share if you don't want to. But yeah, especially you can learn a lot when you ask somebody about their life and the moments that really defined who they are. You'd be surprised.
How challenging do you think that is these days, though? I mean, in your business, your team members are working side by side in a not so sexy space of cleaning someone's bathroom or kitchen, cleaning someone else's dirt. And it's one thing to connect, in that space, but businesses now that are global, different languages, people aren't in the same office, they never see one another face to face. How does that apply in today's, world of global organizations?
Well, I think technology has really impacted the way that we interact, and I think technology is great, and the purpose of it is to make things more efficient and to help us become more productive. But I don't think it should replace the interaction we're supposed to have as human beings. And in my company, we employ many of our students are millennials and Generation Z, and many of our people grew up with phones, and they grew up building their relationships behind text message or in a chat room. And what I realized is, oh man, my team, they don't know how to interact with each other. It's uncomfortable. Building these relationships is not comfortable. So I had to ask myself, how can I, for lack of a better word, force these interactions to get people more comfortable building relationship? And that is why our students clean in teams of 2. That is why we require that they come to our office before their shift, only to get to know their partner and to talk, and that they have to drive together so that they talk. We have one-to-ones with our students where we ask them about their lives and their goals and their fears, and we don't text unless it's something that is not significant at all. Like, what time is the meeting is okay to text, but I want to tell you about my idea, or I'm upset about something that happened today, absolutely can't be over a text. And we have some of our leadership team members aren't in our office. They are virtual. So we talk always on video. We make sure that we start with personal check-ins, anything we can do to make that person feel more connected. So I think the challenge in any company, whether you employ millennials or not, is how do we keep the technology for what it's intended for and make sure that we are forcing our people to interact with each other. And maybe that means no cell phones in conference rooms anymore, that when you go into the room, the first 10 minutes are just relationship building, and even on video, talking to people, seeing how they're doing. These things are critical, and especially when it comes to the next generation, because if they don't get that interaction and that experience, and then you're asking them to call a customer or to sell something to somebody, it's very hard because they're very uncomfortable.
What do you think your biggest screw up was or has been to date?
Oh, there's so many, and I've learned so much from each, but I think the biggest screw up is when you make the same mistake twice and you don't learn from it, and I've done that. And I think in the early days, confronting the elephant in the room, saying, giving the feedback that's required for this person to grow, that was really hard for me. But I learned so many times that I had to do that. And by not doing that, I really screwed things up. And then recently we had a situation where we had a second branch in Pensacola, Florida, which is about 5 hours from our Gainesville branch. And things weren't going well in Pensacola. The people who we had leading the location, they weren't natural salespeople. They knew that. We knew that. They weren't doing work that they loved. They were asked to do sales, and it wasn't something they loved. And they had voiced that several times, and the numbers weren't great. And I, instead of dealing with that, I just said, it'll get better. I knew we needed a different leadership team there, but I didn't want to think about telling these two wonderful people that they couldn't work there anymore because we didn't have another position available in the company. Cared about them so much. And they also didn't want to let me down. And they stuck with the sales, even though they didn't like it. And it hurt our company. We ended up having to sell the branch. And it was because of them. They came to me and said, hey, we have to do something. And they were right, but it took far too long. And so that to me is a big screw up, because I learned that lesson before. I've learned that you have to confront the elephant in the room and talk about it. And I've learned that when you do that, everything works out. But for some reason with this one, it was just really hard. And so I can't allow myself to make that mistake again. And I won't. I mean, I think you always have to, after every screw up, you have to reflect what happened here, what is a lesson, and try really hard not to let it happen again. And that's where I failed in this situation.
Do you keep in contact with your former employees, Kristen?
I do, and I wish I could be better at that. There are so many students who have worked with us through the years, and there are a few that I keep up with regularly. We're actually exploring doing an alumni network, because we really want to have just a group of where we all know what we're up to, and we follow each other and we connect with each other and can help each other. But what's so funny about Student Maid is while people are in their role and cleaning and learning, I don't think they quite realize yet just how much this job prepares them for what's coming next and what they're actually learning. So usually we hear from our students years after they've graduated, and they say, thanks for what you guys taught me. I really learned a lot. But it's not until they have that real world experience that they maybe recognize that, which is validating, because it shows us that we're doing something right. And it also shows our leadership team, because I think our leaders are servant leaders. They are the definition, because they're investing all this time in teaching these young people, but they're not seeing the fruits of their labor. They're not getting the thank you so much yet, because that doesn't usually come until later when the person realizes how much they learned. So it's very validating. We know that we're on the right track. We know that people are learning and growing in our culture, and that it is making a difference. But our next step is, how do we connect all of our alumni and actually can we actually have some measurable results to show this is how many students of ours have gone off to start a business, and these are the percent that are in a leadership role, and that's really exciting to us, to be able to show people that what this kind of culture can do for people.
Don't forget to find us and connect on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter at Barry-Wehmiller. And you can find more podcasts, articles, and videos at trulyhumanleadership.com. I'm Brent Stewart. Thanks for listening.